So in this lesson, we're going to start creating some of our template data and render it out in the DOM. Now for this, we're going to use the ngoninit lifecycle hook. First things first, we're going to dive into our template. We're going to replace the default contents with a nice div. Inside of the div, we are then going to start printing out a card for each particular donut, which means that we can go and create a new div inside. So this is going to be our top level element, and then inside we're then going to have lots of individual cards, and we'll work out how to iterate our data as we continue. But first, now that we've got things set up from the base, we want to introduce some data. Let's go ahead and declare the fact that we want to use a donut property. So this is going to just be an array. Now for this, we're going to just simply type it as an empty array, and then we'll go ahead and add some type definitions. Now for static data, we can take various approaches. We could declare the array's value up here, which means that we wouldn't need our operator to tell TypeScript that we do in fact have some data because we are assigning a value here. And this is personal preference. If we are going to declare some static data throughout this course, we're going to start making some API requests. So we're going to move that logic into the ngoninit lifecycle hook. If you have some completely static data, then it might be okay, depending on the scenario, to just simply hard code it at the top. However, I like to declare our types at the top of our component and then start to assign the data in things such as the ngoninit lifecycle hook. So that means let's do exactly that. Let's say this.donuts, and then we can assign it some data. Now inside of this, what we're going to do is just create a few different items. First, we'll create an ID, and you can give these any value that you like. I'm just going to give them a random 6 different characters. What we'll also do is add a name property. We're going to call this the just chocolate donut. We're also going to have an icon, and I have strategically named these inside of our assets folder. You can see the names of all of our donuts. So let's go ahead and pick out our just chocolate. So this is going to then correspond. And then we're going to use that icon to then go and grab that particular image. And we'll build out the capabilities as we continue that will allow us to go and manage all this dynamically. We can then add a price of $1.99. And finally, we can add a description. We can say something like, for the pure chocoholic. So let's go ahead and create 1 or 2 more of these. I'm just giving these some random IDs. You can, of course, give them anything you like. I'm going to keep them as a string, though, which is nice and important. Now, the name for this one is going to be the glazed fudge donut. We can then change this over to glazed-fudge. We will change the price for now, and we can also change the description. We'll change this over to something like sticky perfection. Now, for good measure, let's go ahead and create 1 more item. We can give it a random ID, 6 different characters, and the third name we're going to choose is caramel and then swirl. We can, of course, then go and change our icon over to the same name. Price-wise, let's leave it at $1.29, and we can change the description to chocolate drizzled with caramel. So that gives us some data to work with. And as we start to build out this application, we can then repeat all of our items in the DOM. We can then click on them, edit them, you name it. Now at the moment, we have a TypeScript error. So type ID name string, there's lots of stuff in here, is not assignable. So this is one thing I like to keep in mind, is some of the TypeScript errors are most helpful at the end, such as here. So whatever our type is that we're trying to declare is not assignable to type of square bracket array. So what we're going to do for now is just simply leave this as any array. I wanted to break this out into its own lesson so we could focus on where we're going to render our data from. So that's pretty much it in terms of this smart component. However, we don't have a way to print out each particular item in the DOM. So what I want to in fact do is underneath our this.donuts is create a single donut, and then we're going to then build the definition for one of our items, and then we'll work out how to print them all out. So we can jump up and add a quick type definition for this. We can say donut, and we'll just give this a type of any for now. So that means that we can now access our donut inside the DOM. If we then jump inside of here, we can say donut.name, for example. We can then hit save and we have just chocolate. We can then get rid of this and you can see that we have object. So at the moment we need to start plucking out these different properties. Now there's one thing I want to introduce you quickly to, and that is the concept of a pipe. Typically what I would do in an application is do something like console.log, and this would then log out this donut so we can have a look at it. I don't know about you, but this is a way that I like to develop. I like to ensure that my data is there each step of the way. We can simply use the pipe character and then add the word JSON. So JavaScript object notation is what JSON stands for. If we then hit save, Angular is then behind the scenes converting our object over to a proper string via JSON.stringify, which is why we have no quotes here and single quotes, and you can see that everything is double quotes here. So we could in fact do it in our JavaScript if we wanted to. We could say JSON.stringify this.donuts, and that is basically doing the same thing as using this JSON pipe inline. If we then hit save, you can see that we have exactly the same output. So let's revert those changes and go back to where we were. And you can see that we now have an object in the DOM, which is now a JSON object. So we can see that we can access ID, name, icon, price description, and so forth. With that in mind, let's go and add the donut's name. And let's also duplicate this and add the price below it. So for the moment, this is not going to look that great. It just says 119. We'll learn about how to deal with currencies as we continue as well. So the idea of this is we have this container component, and remember inside of our admin we have containers, so we're inside that donut list. This is a component which is going to contain subcomponents. So this piece that I've highlighted here is going to be a child component. We're then going to take our array of data and simply pass the data down and render all of those components. For now, what we're going to do is just simply build it out, break it down into smaller pieces, and then we'll work out as we go how the flow of things actually works. So in essence, we're going to build one small static piece of card that will enable us to then, in the future, then click on this, go to that particular view, edit that product, update the product, whatever we want to do to it, and then be able to navigate back. So this is just the first step for us into understanding, and I think it's crucial that we just take a moment to understand that things such as our data get fetched in this ngoninit lifecycle hook, which is why I've chosen to adopt this pattern from the get-go, because when we come to introduce an actual HTTP request as we continue, all we need to do is just edit inside of here. We don't need to move our data down that we once declared up here, and it leaves our refactoring to a bare minimum. So with that in mind, we want to then go ahead and create some type definitions. So let's jump into the next lesson and do exactly that.